No sleep. I don't have a little brother, but I'm starting to worry that something may have happened to him. You know, they say the human brain isn't so much an information processor as it is an information ignorer. Think about it, at this moment you're not thinking about the skin on the top of your left foot, are you? Or at least, you weren't until I said that. The same way you're not thinking about how that wall looks behind your screen, even though your eyes are transferring data about it constantly, am I right? Everyone's been through the experience of being unable to find a toy or shirt in their room until their mom walks in and picks it up off the ground even if it was hiding in plain view. Your brain and body are constantly, continually, effectively, causing you to ignore the vast majority of the sensory information that you receive so you can better focus on what's important. At least, that's my current best theory as to why it took me falling face first into a notebook for me to notice it. I picked the notebook up and flipped it open, scanning the stained red cover. My eyes slid across it as if the material were slippery, my mind seemingly attempting to get me to ignore it. One thought, gripping the page and opening the cover. A child had written on the inside with a pencil. Ben Christensen, 4th grade English Mrs. Richards. My mouth felt dry. Just below the scrawled writing was my own handwriting. Love ya Benny bro. Mrs. Richards was my English teacher too, so I'll tell her to take it easy on you. I'd apparently written below one of the smiling hearts that I like to draw. I had absolutely no memory of writing that message. My last name is Christensen, but I have no relatives named Ben, and I'm an only child. A child sharing my last name and some phantom writing typically wouldn't have been enough to freak me out like this, but the notebook felt so profoundly wrong. It felt like I was staring into one of the floodlights at the high school football stadium. My mind rebelled, telling me to throw it away, to forget, to stop looking. My arm itched, and I brushed it away absent-mindedly as I shot to my feet. My mom was in her study working on the computer. Mom, called out. Take a look at this. She said, still staring at the computer with a politely disinterested expression. Have you seen this notebook before? I asked, laying it out on the desk. What notebook? She asked. This one. Pointed to the open page where the child's writing laid beside my own. My mom gave the barest of glances before looking back at the computer. No honey, and I don't have time for whatever this game is. What do you mean? I said, pointing down at the page. It's right, something bumped my finger. One pulled my hand back, startled to discover that new writing had appeared. How many doors are there on the second floor? How many doors are there on the second floor? I read aloud. How had new writing? Something caught my sweatshirt as I stepped back, snatching up the notebook. I pulled myself free and headed for the stairs. I ran up the stairs and began counting. There were 3 doors, of course. A bathroom, my parents' room, my room, and... I stared at the 4th door, my eyes gliding across a pair of Minecraft and Fortnite posters the way they had the notebook. I'd never noticed those posters before, though the room faced directly opposite the room LD lived in for 15 years. One opened this new door, my hand and mind rebelling as I stepped into a toy and clothes-strewn 8-year-old boy's room. I stepped forward feeling lightheaded, unsure of what to do. Mom? I called out weakly. Then the lights turned off on their own. I stared at the single switch as it moved back to lit, trying to process what I was seeing. The switch was somehow blocked, covered by a pink fleshy. My eyes widened, following the obstruction and focusing, fighting against my every instinct. A young boy stood in the room with me, eyes red with tears and nose dripping with snot. Julie, he called out between sobs. Can you finally see me? Like and subscribe for more daily uploads. After my high school bully died, his ghost kept tormenting me. I still remember the play when Mason Gardner died. It was a designed run, should have been routine. But he got sandwiched between 2 linemen, and the bigger one caught him helmet to helmet. He lay on the ground, not breathing as the crowd stood silent. Girls were crying. All I could think was that God had finally answered one of my prayers. "What the hell are you so happy about, fat boy?" said a voice, and I looked over to see Mason sitting in the empty seat right next to me. I sat paralyzed and lifted my hand pointing out to the field. "Would you look at that?" "Guess I bit it," he said. He didn't even seem bothered, more like amused. "Bet you thought this was gonna be the best day of your life, huh?" "I wouldn't bet on it, you little fucking piggy. Now I'm gonna be with you 24/7. I'm gonna watch you piss. I'm gonna watch you shit. I'm gonna watch you stuff that little piggy face. Welcome to the suck, fat boy." I grew up in the middle of nowhere, California. There wasn't much to do there, and since 8th grade, Mason Gardner's favorite hobby was making my life hell. At least before he died, I'd been able to escape him whenever I went home, retreating into a world of books and video games. After school, I'd usually try to bike home before I saw him, then plop on the couch and devour a bag of chips while I tore through old Arthur C. Clarke novels or played League of Legends. Now, there was no retreat. Mason was always there, lurking over my shoulder, whispering in my ear. "No wonder you're still a virgin," he'd whisper. "The only exercise you ever get is lifting up Doritos to your disgusting little mouth. This is even sadder than I imagined when I was alive. I assumed you at least had a friend or something." "I did have a friend," I said, wishing I could hurt him. "Don't you remember?" "You mean Chippy? That little twink you used to hang out with? That was like 3 years ago. You're still not over that?" All through middle school and freshman year, my best friend had been Herman Morales. He couldn't have weighed more than 100 pounds, but he had rounded cheeks like a chipmunk, hence Mason's nickname for him. We'd been pretty much inseparable. After school, we'd play Xbox or watch horror movies. He had wanted to be a director, and he was pretty much addicted to filming everything. Like, he'd set up his iPhone on a little makeshift tripod and let it run for hours, just watching us talk shit while we played League, and then he'd edit it into a little 2-minute YouTube video of all the funniest shit, and we'd get like 40 views. As bad as Mason tormented me, the way he went after Herman had been 100 times worse. Every time he spotted him down the hall, he'd yell, "Homo," at the top of his lungs. I never did find out if Herman was actually into girls or guys. It wasn't something he wanted to talk about. But either way, Mason's taunting got under his skin. It wasn't just verbal insults either. Mason made a point to basically body check Herman if they ever got within 10 feet of each other. Herman would just be walking along, probably taking a video of something going on at school and providing his patented narration, and then Mason would show up out of nowhere and send Herman sprawling onto the floor. At one point, it had gotten so bad that Herman actually edited a body check megamix video of himself getting hit like a dozen times. Then he overlaid it with this pretty catchy club beat, occasionally punctuated with Mason screaming, "Homo," at the top of his lungs. I told Herman to show it to the principal, but he just worried it would make things worse. He posted it on YouTube and got like 10 views. And then one day I got a haul from Herman's mom. I could tell she was crying, struggling to tell me something in her broken English. "Herman dead," she said, thought sobs. "Herman die by rope." Almost no one came to the funeral. Herman didn't have many friends at school, and his mom's friends had their own hang-ups, both about suicide and the rumors Herman was gay. His mom said a brief eulogy in Spanish that I didn't understand, and then they asked if anyone else wanted to say a word or two. I had a million things to say. About how I wished LD said something earlier, or stood up to Mason. I wished I could have said that the world lost an awesome future film director, not to mention just a funny, good dude. But I was a coward. I sat silently in my chair as the moment passed. The funeral ended without another speaker coming forward. "You didn't even get up to talk about him," laughed Mason. "I always knew you were a pussy, but now that I can read your thoughts I can see you're really a pussy." "Shut up," I told him. "Just go the fuck away." "Oh, I'll go," he said. "But not alone. See, I'm in your head now, fat boy. Just like I was in Chippy's. Don't you remember just watching him crumble? Come on, really think." No matter how much he smiled and pretended you could see it. Every little word I said to him. Every time I tackled him in the middle of the hall. Well, guess what, Piggy? That's you now. Except, with you there's no escape. And Mason wasn't kidding. All night, he'd keep me up making oinking noises, or screaming for me to wake up. At school, every time I walked by a cute girl, Mason would remind me how disgusting she thought I was. Every time I lost my breath climbing stairs, he'd oink again. And I have to admit, it got to me. Because it was never going to end. He was just going to stay in my ear forever until I chose to end things. It was just a matter of how long I could hold out. The worst thing of all was that everyone at school was mourning Mason's loss. The guys on the team dedicated the rest of the season to him. Girls came out of the woodwork, saying they'd dated, vying for sympathy. Random guys who barely knew him talked about what a fun dude he'd been. And Mason ate it all up. He'd air high-five the guys with his ghost hands and bury his face in the girls' breasts, making motorboat sounds, even as they cried over his loss. Think they're gonna shed a tear when you come join me on this side? Mason asked. They don't even know your name. You're gonna fade from memory in 10 seconds flat, and then, in 20 years, they're gonna half remember you as that one fat kid that killed himself senior year. That's not true, I said, but I could tell my resolve was weakening. That Friday, a school-wide memorial was going to be held during last period, billed as a time of mourning and healing. When they asked for volunteers to speak and share stories about Mason, the list was a mile long. As for me, I got conscripted to run the audio visuals, complete with a slideshow one of his exes had made set to 2 different Coldplay songs. Good shit, said Mason as we finished watching the slideshow on my laptop. I think I'm going to let you live until after the memorial. It's gonna be sick. Not a dry eye in the house. The rest of that week would have been bad enough, but then something even worse happened. Mason learned how to hurt me physically. It started with the slightest of taps. I woke in the middle of a storm and assumed water was dripping from the ceiling and down into my face. It wasn't until I opened my eyes that I saw Mason standing over me, flicking my nose with a calloused finger. Got your nose, Piggy, he whispered. From there it got worse. I'd be walking down the hall at school, only to trip seemingly out of nowhere, my papers flying everywhere. Mason thought it was just about the funniest shit he'd ever seen. Why'd I waste so much time tackling Chippy, he asked. You're way funnier when you fall. Chalk it up to life's regrets, I guess. Then, as I was walking home, he tripped me right by a busy street and I went tumbling into traffic. For a moment, my heart beat 200 beats a minute, as I watched a minivan bear down on me. Then it swerved at the last second. I was alive. Over on the sidewalk, Mason laughed and laughed as I lay in the street trembling. And for the first time, I was truly afraid of him. Not as some annoyance, but as something inhuman, some kind of embodiment of inevitable death. Maybe he'd drive me to do it myself. Maybe he'd do it for me. Either way, one knew I couldn't beat him. Not long now, he smirked. I know. I want you there for the memorial. But watching you get pancaked would have been fucking funny. Finally, the day of the memorial arrived. For all I knew, it was going to be the last day of my life. I ate ice cream for breakfast and walked to school on full autopilot, like I was already dead inside. At the assembly, we listened to speech after speech about Mason. How he always made everyone laugh. I played a highlight reel of his best games, and the crowd ate it up, erupting as if the touchdowns were happening in real time. God, what a fucking reel, said Mason. Definitely could have gone pro. That's the thing that pisses me off most about you, you fat fuck. You're still alive, and I'm here. And you're not gonna do shit with your life. I could be scoring TDs and banging the rest of the cheerleading team. And you're sitting on your ass playing games and crying yourself to sleep. The highlight reel ended. It was time for the slideshow now, the capstone on Mason's glory. Mason beamed as the crowd grew silent. My hand hovered over the play button. What you waiting for, Piggy? Play it. But I was too busy accessing my Google Drive and navigating to old videos. I'd kept Herman's work, you see. Every last minute of it. I switched the mic in the booth to live and spoke. And now, one last video to help us remember. Mason Gardner said. Please enjoy. What the fuck are you doing, piggy? Mason asked. And for the first time since he'd materialized next to me in that football stadium, he looked surprised. Maybe even scared. One hit play on the body check Megamix. A different kind of highlight reel played now. Herman's highlights. The crowd watched as Mason tackled poor Herman 24 times, screaming obscenities. Herman's catchy song played as we watched tackle after tackle. Hit after hit. The crowd began to murmur and boo, but I just smiled. By the time the assistant principal ran into the booth to shut me down, it was too late. The video had played. Mason's legacy was sealed. For a second, everything was silent. And then I saw one small figure clapping in the back of the auditorium. He shot me a big toothy smile. And then he disappeared. Mason's eyes went wide as he realized who we'd just seen. Chippy? As it turned out, that was the last word Mason ever spoke. For some reason, from that day on, his voice didn't seem to work anymore. He was still there, a lurking presence, but it was like someone had pressed the mute button. I could tell he was screaming, shouting every epithet in the book. But nothing was getting through anymore. The last time I saw him was on the bus as it took me down to LA for college. He was sitting there next to me like usual. Trying to yell, trying to flick at me with completely no effect. And then when we reached the county line, it was like he hit a wall. The bus kept going, but Mason was trapped in place. We moved forward as he sat in thin air. And before I knew it, he disappeared in the rearview mirror. Like and subscribe for more daily uploads. And hit the bell icon so you won't miss another video.